Hello, everybody, and welcome to Southern Summers and Northern Winters, the second episode. Hi, Mark. How are you doing?
Hi, Anders. I'm great. The second episode, all
Yeah,
keen. Let's talk.
the big episode two. We'll see how it goes. Yeah. So in this episode, we're starting to ease into some of the many topics that we have lined up for this podcast series, and as I was last week, I was in Vienna with my family, Vienna, Austria. I think we can just talk a little bit from there on because Mark, you have been. Were you there with your family as well, or was that before you had a family?
No, I was certainly there. I was certainly there with my family.
Yeah.
It was a bit further back than when you were there. I believe it was probably, well, it might have been 2017 or 2018. But I guess the thing with classical cities like Vienna is a lot of the attractions don't change because a lot of them
True.
are sort of historical based, aren't they?
Yeah. This was the first time we were there with our son Anton. He's 14, and I believe it's 16 or 17 years since our last visit in Vienna, just as a couple back then. And boy, has it changed. As you say, a lot of the attractions are the same, but it was a different vibe this time. Maybe because we had our son with us, I guess. But there were a lot of tourists, as seemed to be the trend in European big cities at the moment. A lot of international overseas tourists. Um, but you know, I guess it's what it's current trend, and you can easily get away for just 3-4 days, extended weekend on a quick trip, and they will feel like you've been you've been regenerated with energy, and you've got new inspiration. It's a quick and easy solution for many people to just go to a city and dive in for a couple of days within a relatively small geographical area, I guess. It's not like driving across Australia or the US. I mean, you got everything within
Yeah,
like a few kilometers.
definitely.
Yeah, yeah,
I think there's a real kickback against over tourism, I think, going on at the moment in a lot of places in Europe. I know cities
yeah.
like Barcelona are really, really strong on it and have been for a long time. I remember going to Barcelona, I think maybe the same time I went to Vienna, and even back then, 8 years ago, or 7 years ago, there were signs on walls, like in alleyways, saying "Go home, tourists! Tourists, we don't need
Yeah,
you." Things like that, because I think Airbnb is a big culprit behind a lot of it, and that's what a
yeah.
lot of people were kicking up about. Because no longer can traditional families, especially in Barcelona, traditional Catalan families can't afford to live in the center of Barcelona
Mhm.
because apartments are all rented out as Airbnbs, where people are getting $200-300 a night instead of charging $200-300 a week for families to live.
Yes, true. It's a huge Airbnb. Um, it's a whole different kettle of fish because we've had good and bad experiences with exactly that as well. And but on in terms of local communities against Airbnb, I can certainly understand that because it disrupts the whole dynamic of a local community when,
Yeah, well,
well, first of all, when people can no longer afford living there because the apartments are being or houses are being bought by investors, professionals who only buy them in order to
yeah, to
to
profit.
to, to profit and do Airbnb rentals.
Hmm. Takes
Um,
the authenticity away from the
it
neighborhoods, I
does.
guess.
It does, doesn't it? I mean,
If a lot of tourists are moving in,
yeah,
or moving in, moving out, moving in, moving out, aren't they?
yeah.
Because they're all short term.
There's no continuity. There's no.
No,
I mean, it's just people, and they don't really care about the local area, how it
no,
looks, and they
no, of
don't
course not.
take any ownership. Um, and that's what I like in a city, in a local community, is that you know people, and you know that other people like to live there, hopefully, and they will protect the local well, parks and
Yeah.
streets, and don't make graffiti on the walls and stuff like that. It's just,
This is
yeah,
true. I mean, look, I had a look the other day actually because I stayed in an Airbnb in Melbourne, I think maybe 3 weeks ago. But in all the years I've been traveling, I had a look and I reckon I've stayed in under 10 Airbnbs in the
yeah,
last 15 years. So not through any choice. I just generally find staying in a hotel just as just as convenient, and and I guess on the added front, it's not keeping someone out of an apartment in an area I go to if I'm staying in a hotel, because the hotel is already there. So unless I really have to, and unless there's a really big advantage with staying in an Airbnb, well, generally we just stay in a hotel.
exactly. Yeah. Well, we last week we stayed in a it was called a residence. So it was a flat, and it was in an old townhouse. But the whole house, I think there were like 15 flats. It was owned by the same, is owned by the same company. They
Person,
have
yeah.
they have more locations around Vienna. And for a family, we have a teenage son, so we were definitely in need of two bedrooms,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
it can be a little costly
Yeah.
if you need two hotel rooms.
Two hotel
Uh,
rooms. Yeah,
yeah,
I hear.
so we did that, but I am. Yeah, I don't know about the local policies, legislation in Vienna, how that works, but it was a local community, and there were lots of local people around. So it seemed like the balance had not been disrupted there. I think it was the
I think
only.
actually, I think actually we stayed in a local apartment too when we were in Vienna on
Yeah,
like a street in one of the suburbs. I actually remember this fondly. Yeah, it was on a second floor, and the apartment had two bedrooms and a kitchen and things like that. Like if you're going to stay
exactly.
for a week,
Yeah,
sometimes it's handy to have a kitchen, and sometimes it's handy to have a laundry because everyone needs to wash their clothes, and you take a t-shirt to a hotel and it costs you $20 to get a t-shirt washed.
that's
So
exactly it. And we had all these amenities. We had the
yeah,
kitchen, we had the washing machine, the dryer, everything. It was there. It was a fully equipped flat, and it was cool because we're also just around the corner. Really, there were bakeries and supermarkets, and so we just
yeah.
went down and made our own breakfast in the flat. So that's another cost saving thing, because many European hotels, they will charge you anything from 15 to 30 euros
Yeah,
per person per day for
for
just
breakfast.
a breakfast buffet, right? So it can
It's
quickly,
crazy, isn't it?
yeah, it could quickly amount to yeah, well, 75, 80 euros a
Yeah,
day
definitely.
for
Just
a
for
family,
breakfast.
just for breakfast, and it's not even good.
Like
No,
food, they added on, like, if they can get you, they'll get you with the extra costs, won't they? I find that on, I guess if you're going on like, ferries and you're in airports, similar sort of
oh
situation,
yeah.
if you need to eat or you need to do something and you're stuck in an area where you actually have to pay, you'll certainly pay, won't you?
Absolutely. That's where they will hit you with their way of making money. I mean, we're going to get into this in a later episode, but just the airport terminals, it's huge
Oh,
business. It's big business, and they
yeah.
will rip you of anything before you go into security. In the security situation, they will strip you from anything from bottled water to anything edible, and then you can just spend your money in the terminal in this secured area.
That's like
Uh,
add on after add on after add on,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah, 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 yeah. So,
I was
yeah.
watching I was watching a YouTube video actually last night. This guy I watch, and he was taking a ferry from the north of Denmark
Okay.
to Iceland. So
Yeah.
takes like 3 days. I was really interested in it because it's something I would like to do going
Yes.
forward at some
Hmm.
stage.
Yeah.
But I added it up, and for like 3 days, it was something like €1,000 for two of
Yes.
us to do it.
Yes. Yeah.
By the time you add, okay, so I get this breakfast was €50 a day for two people, and
Yeah.
dinner was €90 a day for two people.
Yeah.
So I mean, once you're on board, you got to eat, obviously. So unless you bring all your food with you, I guess, and want to eat noodle cups and and sandwiches like that for 3 days. But so yeah, so they charged you to get on. There was a certain base rate, and then if you wanted a room, like then there was another rate, and then
Yeah,
you could buy an alcohol package for your room, which wasn't much. It was like 6 cans of beer and a couple of soft drinks and a couple of chocolate bars or something like that. Yeah, but
yeah, yeah.
in the end, yeah, it was well over €1,000 for this 3 night cruise from Denmark
On top of the
to
ticket
Iceland.
to on top of the ticket to go to Iceland. So
Yeah,
that yeah.
definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And then where you land in Iceland is right over on the other side away from Reykjavik. So then you would have to fly to Reykjavik, possibly from where the ferry comes in, or you'd have to get a slow bus. Like I've driven halfway to where it was before one day from Reykjavik, and it took about 8 hours. So
Yeah.
I can imagine the bus would be 15 hours, maybe overnight. But yeah,
Yeah,
so it all adds up. And Iceland is really expensive as it is. So,
it
but yeah,
is. Yeah, it is
good to
because
have a dream.
it's a remote island, and almost anything costs money, a lot of
Yeah.
money up there. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, yeah. Well, back to Airbnb. I mean, it's something that would you recommend Airbnb in general, Mark? I don't know if because I'm a little split on that.
Yeah. Well, that's why I don't look at it first off. And I must admit, I've only started looking at it more lately because I get sick of the things that you were saying, like paying for breakfast. And
Yeah.
what really annoys me is I hate paying for parking. Like I'm already staying at your hotel, like,
Hmm.
and then you want me to pay another, say in Australia. Australia's probably not too bad. I don't really know. Like in Melbourne, it might cost you $30 a night for parking. But when we were in Auckland last year, we stayed at Voco, which was a pretty flash hotel, and it was $68 New Zealand a night to park your car. Like that's
Wow.
$68. That's crazy. Like, and the car park was right next door to them, and it probably wasn't even theirs. Like it was probably they just rent the space off someone else, and
Yeah.
then charge you an absolute fortune to park there. So that really annoys me most is paying for parking. And because we live a fair way out of the city, like 2 or 3 hours from Melbourne, we have to drive down to the city, and there's no public transport in our town, so I can't just jump on a train to go to Melbourne. So I either have to get someone to take us to the train station and pick us up, which is 25 kilometers away, or I have to drive, and then I have to pay for
Yeah.
parking. So
Yeah.
yeah, so Airbnb often you can filter out free parking, which is quite handy, I think, especially if you're going for 2 or 3 nights. It's not too bad if you're only going for one night. Like I can handle $30, but if I'm paying $100 parking on top of my $200 or $300 a night in the hotel, then it all of a
Yeah.
sudden starts to spiral out of control.
Exactly, exactly. And the next thing about Airbnb is that we've happened. This has happened to us twice. Once in Berlin and another time in Denmark. That it was canceled from the
Yeah,
owner
owner.
shortly before our arrival, and we
Yeah,
had in the Berlin situation, we had my mother flying in from Denmark, and we were coming
yeah,
by train from Munich. It was booked months ahead,
yeah,
and what we realized was that as we were arriving, there was a big fair in Berlin, a travel fair or
yeah,
expo.
yeah.
So probably what had happened was that, and this is just me guessing, but they realized they could actually get more
More. I'm guessing you're right.
uh, by renting out to some businessman coming in who do not care about the cost.
No.
So like 2 or 3 days before, it was just canceled. And this is one of the things that's a really a deal breaker
Yeah,
for
definitely.
family traveling. You can't live with that. I mean, that's just
Definitely. I can't say I've ever had one cancelled, but we rolled up to one in where were we? In a city called Bandung in Indonesia, where we had booked one, and it clearly stated that it fitted 4 people. So we rolled up to this apartment that was about the size of a laundry once we got in there, and like there was one queen size bed, and there was one sofa bed. Okay, so it really probably would have fitted 4, but there was no linen for the sofa bed. There was no blankets. There was no pillows. There was no sheets.
Oh,
And I rang them, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, no, there isn't any. And I'm like, well, I clearly stated there was going to be four of us. Like, so you would think that that was mandatory. So we had this whole discussion where she would only give me a refund if I didn't give her a bad review.
Oh,
So,
that's like
so
taking the
yeah,
guest
so
hostage.
yeah, basically, and that's what she was doing. She was like, "I'll give you a refund if you only leave if you leave a positive review, and I need you to leave the review before I give you the refund."
That's outrageous. That's
Yeah, so
outrageous. Yeah.
so yeah, so after that, I don't think I used one for a good few years after that. Not for that specific reason, but yeah, but that's one of the things I guess that happened to us. And that's the thing, you've got no real recourse with Airbnb because you haven't got front desk staff or anything
No.
like that. I guess like you have at a hotel, have you? And you know, and if something happens, then you got to wait for them to message you back and all these sort of things like that. And yeah, so yeah, there's good and bad, isn't there, with
Yeah, yeah.
all systems.
And quite frankly, I must say, it's often it's not even cheaper than hotel.
No.
Because people, and this I can actually understand. If I were a private person, I had a room in my house, inviting foreign people in, probably charge as well. But it has to be. I believe the idea of Airbnb was originally that you could actually travel and stay overnight. Accommodation would be somewhat cheaper than hotels,
Yeah.
but as it has evolved as a platform, it's really gotten expensive. We have a neighbor here in our area. We Because my mom was coming, and so I was looking for Airbnb accommodation within close proximity of where we live, and there were a few, but it was basement rooms with no natural
Yeah.
light coming in,
Yeah.
or it was an attic room, and it was more than 100 euros per night per person. And if you're two persons sharing a room,
Yeah.
well, at 200 euros, you could easily get a 200 euro
Yeah.
nice
Hotel.
hotel room in
Yeah.
Munich. So that's where we ended up. So I think you really have to be careful with Airbnb.
I think they have the cleaning fees are sometimes outrageous on Airbnb
Yeah.
as well.
And
Like I've noticed that the cleaning fees can be similar like half the price of half a night's accommodation there. Like I'm like
exactly.
$80 or $100 in Australia is the cleaning fee. Sometimes I'm like, surely it doesn't. Someone's not working for 2 hours or 3 hours to clean this place. It's only a small apartment. Like
And often it's written in tiny letters that they want you to leave the cleaning fee cash on
yeah.
the dining table. So yeah, it's not being it's not being officially reported as income anywhere.
No, of course not. I think there was a big hoo-ha about it in Australia a few years ago how they were hiding all their fees. So in Australia, they've actually got to state all their fees on their site, so you can't
Yeah.
actually now say leave the cleaning fee. It's got to officially be on Airbnb's booking platform. So there'll be
Yes.
the apartment fee, then Airbnb's fee, and then the cleaning fee will all be listed, which is
Yes.
quite good.
Yeah. Yeah, so no, last week in Vienna was not booked by Airbnb. It was an official hotel. I think it was booking.com actually
Yeah,
that we booked it, where we booked it, and it was, as I said, a residence flat, a residence house. And there were lots of other children's families in the house. We
yep,
could, because it was the Halloween week here in Europe,
yeah,
and
yes,
so it's a school holiday, and yeah, there were lots of Germans, but it was also a holiday a week in Austria, in fact.
okay.
So yeah, so maybe that's why a lot of no, I'm just thinking maybe that was the reason why there were so many people in Vienna last week, but there were so many overseas tourists. I
Yeah.
mean, really, lots of Americans, and lots of Asian tourists.
Were they the
Uh,
loudest people in the room, the Americans? You could hear them coming?
Yeah. It's funny you should say that. We went to the Sissi Museum. Have the
Yes, yeah, I
Empress
know what you're talking. Yep,
Elizabeth? She's very popular person. I think it's 200 years ago. There was the
yeah,
Empress in Austria and Bavaria called Elizabeth, and her nickname is Sissi, and she's still very popular to this day as a historical figure. And yeah, so we went to that museum, and they had a special exhibition where you were led into like narrow corridors, and it was dark, and it's probably an interesting exhibition, but it was so over. They let too many people in at one
yeah.
time, although you had booked your time slot ahead. You book that online, and you book your ticket
Yep.
online, and you pay everything online. So it's all, but still, there were too many people allowed within the same time slot, or they were staying too long. I don't know, but so it really wasn't a good experience, and the reason for that was that there were lots of American tourists with their audio guides, and they, that you in the audio guide you push a number because there's a sign saying push number 10 here, and then they
Yeah.
would listen to that whole explanation, which could probably take up to 2 minutes,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't move whilst they were listening to that. So the whole exhibition was like a bottleneck to get through, and then you could get into the living quarters and the original rooms and all of that. So
Do they still have is it the crown jewels? Are they still on display at there?
no, they were not. I think that's
No,
separate. It's
is
in
that
the
a
same
separate one?
location. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's in the same location, the same castle or
Yeah.
palace, but they will
Okay.
charge you another 10
Yeah.
euros to get in
I
there.
think we went to the crown jewels, I think, and didn't go into but I yes distinctly remember that it was in the same sort of castle complex or the same
It
palace
is.
there when
Yeah.
so
Hof,
yeah, and we went there. I found them.
Hofburg. Yeah, I think it's called
Yes, that's
Hofburg.
the
Yeah.
one at the
Yeah.
Hofburg. Yep.
Yeah.
I found the crown jewels really good when we went there. They were quite unique, but they also had a lot of like religious artifacts, which religious history interests me. I'm not religious by any sense of the imagination. I don't go to church or anything, but I often find it interesting that there can be, 100 pieces of the Holy Cross scattered around, and
Yeah.
everyone's got one.
Yeah.
And every church in Europe seems to have a piece of the cross or a piece of the crown of thorns or something like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I always find that quite interesting. And there was quite a few so-called relics from the time of Christ in the Austrian center where the crown jewels were held. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. In general, there are lots of churches. Catholic. It's a Catholic area.
yeah,
Southern Germany and Austria.
yep.
So the churches are, I wouldn't say over decorated. They're heavily decorated with with gold and
They're very
marble.
ornate, aren't they?
Yeah,
Yeah,
they are very ornate, um, which is beautiful. But like you, Mark, I'm not in any sense a particularly religious person. But
no,
I enjoy this gigantic quietness when you get into a big like cathedral,
definitely.
big church
And
room. It's
especially if you get one where there's not many people around. I remember going
yeah,
to I think is it the Pilgrimage of the Weiss out near Linderhof Castle in Germany. It's a
yeah,
white.
yeah,
Yeah, I've been there a couple of times. So there's never many tourists there both times I've been there, and it's a very nice church out there, and surrounded by paddocks and not in a city, just out in the middle of nowhere. So I
yeah,
always found that to be a nice church. A couple of times I have called in there. So, but yeah, I find churches really interesting, and like I said, I'm not religious, but I like the size and scale, I guess, of a lot of them,
yeah,
and the stained glass windows, and I find it interesting that people that are possibly buried in there, and different things like that.
yeah.
May sound a bit macabre, but it's all a
No,
bit interesting history. So
and you can really feel the weight of of the centuries, the history
yeah,
there. I mean, you sit there, and it's like I said, it's quiet. It's massively quiet, and
yeah,
and 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 it's a a nice temperature as well. It's usually a little bit cooler than so
Yeah.
if you come on a hot summer's day, it's nice to get in there and just sit down and just reflect. It's a nice place to reflect and just gather your thoughts and before you go out to the crowded streets again. I think it's and in Vienna there are so many churches.
Yeah.
I would say in general, Vienna, Austria, is a really a place that it's probably inspired many fairy tale authors. Because the whole architecture it's very much like Disney and the Grimm brothers, and it's very ornate. The churches are very vast and big and decorated. So if you're into that kind of stuff, Vienna is definitely the place to go because you can walk around for days just looking at the
Looking at churches.
churches and palaces and
Palaces, yeah.
facades.
Yeah, most
Yeah,
definitely. In Vienna, I often say that Vienna is probably maybe the most regal city I've ever been to, possibly, like because there is just so many palaces and buildings and manicured parks and
yeah,
gardens and all that sort of stuff going on in Vienna. That's for sure.
yeah. Unfortunately, speaking of manicured parks, we went to the Belvedere.
Yeah.
It's an art museum now.
Yep.
Gustav Klimt, the
Klimt.
Kiss
Yep.
is
Yeah.
probably the most prominent.
I've been there, but never went inside. Walked the garden from the front to the back, where the
Yeah,
fountains are still there, are they? I
yeah.
think the
It's
ponds.
all
Yeah, yeah,
there,
yeah,
but
yeah.
the bushes, the trees and stuff. It
Oh, okay.
was a little bit. It didn't look healthy, honestly.
Yeah,
They had a lot of these small manicured hedges and stuff. I guess they had a drought probably this summer,
yeah.
so it was all brown and stuff. They looked like they were going to be replaced. These
Okay.
so there were gardeners all over. So it wasn't
Yep.
really that
As
wasn't
stunning or striking.
no,
Yeah.
but I could sort of see how it was meant to be, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So yeah.
imagination goes a long way, doesn't
Yeah.
it? So,
Yeah. Yeah. So another thing you could definitely, if you're into Mozart used to live in Vienna, and this is one of the things that we didn't do this time around because we simply didn't have enough time. But if you're into Mozart, you can definitely go to many of the places where he would perform his work. And there's a place where he used to live as well. I think he died in Vienna as well. So
okay.
yeah,
Sounds a bit like Warsaw. They hang their hat on a lot of Chopin
yeah,
places when I've been to Warsaw. Yeah, there's
yeah,
tons of Chopin stuff going on
yeah.
in Warsaw.
And one of the things that because it's a little touristic, but one of the things that in terms of Mozart, you can have the Mozart Kugel. Have you ever tried one of those? Those chocolate filled chocolate?
I think I have actually.
Yeah,
Have they got the liquidy center in them?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah, I have had one of them.
That's the Mozart bowl or Kugel.
Yeah, yes, I
Uh,
have.
so yeah, there's a whole
Speaking of
shop just
food,
for that. Yeah.
speaking of food, did you go find the big schnitzel?
We found the house, but
Yeah.
and honestly, I didn't want to queue up for an hour to get in.
No, that's fine. I agree. I wouldn't have it either if that was the case. So
Yeah, and it was the case. It's in fact many of the kind of institutions that let me say institutions when it's a
yeah,
classic thing you have to do.
yeah, yeah,
That was the schnitzel is one thing, but also we there's something called Café Centrale or
yep,
Café Sacher in the Sacher Hotel. They had the Sacher Torte,
yep,
the Sacher tart chocolate cake. Um, in all these places, you have to line up and just wait to get a seat.
yeah,
And quite frankly, to go into these classical Vienna cafes, the value for money is not that
Hmm.
good.
No.
So,
I hear.
yeah. So we just
Because
kind
they
of
know people will pay for it. That's
yeah,
why. So it
yeah,
doesn't have to be great value. People just want the people I guess want the Insta picture, don't they? Like or the
yeah.
the snapshot to say that
And you
they
could
were
see the
there.
people lining up were overseas tourists. They were not
Yeah.
locals. They were
No.
not locals at all. So and even if I get into one of these big cafes, I would still want the Vienna feeling, the Vienna vibe, and you don't get that.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not. I don't mean to sound like a big idiot here, but if it's filled with overseas tourists like myself,
It's not local, is it, really?
and that's not really local. I want to experience a
No.
local vibe.
Yeah,
So what we
definitely.
did was we found some of these side alleys where they have the small cafes,
Yep.
with also a true Vienna feeling, and we went in
Yep.
there. And they're scattered all over the city.
Yeah.
And you could actually get like a piece of cake and a coffee or hot chocolate or tea
Yep.
for decent
Yeah.
money. So
Because
so
let's be honest, not a lot of tourists go 1 block or 2 blocks off the main streets, really, do they?
no,
So, all you got to do is walk a little bit off the beaten path, and you'll often find better value restaurants, bars, cafes, things like that.
I always say go where the locals go.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
yeah.
Def- Definitely. Like I get asked this all the time, mainly about Bali, because there's a like Bali's notorious for what's called Bali belly, I guess, where you can get it's like a gastro or a food poisoning, I guess, and generally lasts 24, 48 hours, and it makes you really sick. But and people are like, oh, I don't know where to eat, and I always just say, if there's a lot of Indonesians eating there, go and eat there, because I have a theory in Bali that most people get sick who are staying at hotels that have a buffet, and they wheel the buffet out every day, and
Yes.
what's not been eaten goes back in the fridge and gets reheated the next day, and then comes back out
Although
again. So
that's
so
not a yeah
this
yeah.
is my theory on what happens in Bali is that you get sick when you eat at places like that. So go to local places, like go to local hole in the walls, as long as there's plenty of Indonesians there or plenty of Austrians there in that case, or even
Yes.
in China, plenty of Chinese. If you see lots of locals, just go and eat there. It's always going to be good. The food's going to be fresh and it's going to be cheaper.
We had the same experience in Rome. We went to Rome a couple of years ago, and looking for a place to have a pizza, classic Italian pizza. Yeah, go where the local Italians sit. They will know.
Yeah,
They will know a good pizza, and
that's it. They're not going to eat
uh,
bad pizza, are they, if they're
no,
from
no,
there? So.
no, exactly. So yeah, is it? Speaking of Bali, is it true that you should stick to the one side heading to the one coast heading towards Australia, because the one heading up towards the Chinese Sea is not the healthiest. A lot of stuff coming from.
No, I've been to the north coast of Bali, and it's actually getting further developed at the moment. But
Okay,
we went there about 5 years ago, and actually, all it lacks is infrastructure. Actually, when we were
okay,
there, it's probably different now. But the water was really clear. A lot of people go up there. It's popular for it's popular for dolphins, and it was probably actually one of the worst experiences I ever had when it came to that. Stayed at this beautiful little resort on the beach, and so they're like, we can go and find some dolphins one morning, So and it was cheap as chips, like $10 a person, and
yeah.
so 4 of us piled into this traditional Balinese sort of longboat, like catamaran thing that has the bits out the side. So we're going to find these dolphins, and after about 20 minutes, there was about 100 of these boats chasing a pod of about 8 dolphins.
Oh, oh.
Like it was really sad in the end. And in the end, I said, look, about enough, mate. Just take us back to the shore. So it was, but that's an Asian thing, like similar to over tourism. Asians don't
Yeah.
believe in that either. Like it's just a free for all. So that I really wasn't happy with, and I tell people that all the time when they say what's there to do in North Bali. Say don't go chasing dolphins, because
Don't do the dolphins, no.
that's pretty sad. That's a pretty sad thing to do. So, but
Yeah.
um, but most of getting back to what you're saying though, but most of the tourists that go to Bali, 90% of them would be on that coastline that's facing down towards Australia. That's for
Yeah.
sure, because
Yeah.
the infrastructure's just not there up the top. It's more local, local tourists and more Indonesians because there's actually that coastline is close to Java, which is the biggest island. There's a ferry that goes between the big island of Java, which is where Jakarta and the bigger cities are, and Bali. It takes about half an hour to get over on ferry, so it's pretty popular with local Indonesians up that area, and
Okay.
much cheaper than the
Yeah.
south.
Yeah, because I just heard that the Chinese are filling the waters with God knows what, and it's just kind of floating down towards or out towards Bali and Indonesia.
Yeah,
And
I don't know. There's a lot of rubbish always on the beach in Indo
yeah,
because they haven't really got a great sewer system. There's a lot of small rivers and creeks that flow through there, and there's not a lot of people just throw their stuff out on the street, and that's just and you'll get if there's a flood, it all flows out to sea, and it all floats
yeah,
back up onto the
oh,
beach,
yeah.
and that's what happens, and then
So it's
they.
local rubbish. It's not the
Yeah,
Chinese.
no, it's local rubbish, a lot of it. Yeah, so then the next morning they're out there with locals are out there with their rakes covering it up, things like that, picking it
Yeah,
up, trying to get it off
yeah.
the beaches. But, if that, the problem with Bali is it was never designed for the amount of tourists that are going there now. So all the roads are tiny, there's no real infrastructure. Actually, they're trying to build a train system at the moment. They're going to start it next
Okay.
year. I think they're going
Yeah,
to build an underground subway to try and alleviate some of the traffic problems. But this will be a 10-year plan and it's funded by China and Japan and places like that. They'll be all paying for it for them.
yeah.
And so then I assume people will be paying for it for the rest of their lives to pay it off. But like a lot of the roads in Bali are probably a little bit more than maybe a single lane, like fit 1.5 cars across. So it can take you anywhere up to 3 hours to travel 20 kilometers across the island. So yeah, the
Oh,
traffic
yeah,
is the traffic is just it's crazy, and you can't catch public transport because it gets caught in the same traffic as
yeah,
as a taxi or a rideshare. So
yeah.
so yeah, so you just sort of go to where you're going to stay and try and stay there as much as you can
That's the
within
beauty
walking
about
distance.
a city like Vienna, for instance. The infrastructure is certainly built for lots of traffic, and it's rather clean, I must say. Even Anton noticed this, our son. He said, this is a nice, clean city. It's cleaner than Munich, and Munich is
Yeah,
sort of clean. It's
yeah,
but in Munich we have the situation. For the past 10 years we've been they have been working on expanding the metro and S-Bahn system, the local train system,
yep,
with tunnels, extra tunnels under the city, and it's a massive undertaking. So the entire downtown of Munich is sort of like a big construction site, and it has been for 10 years and probably will be for the next 10 years. But
yeah,
after this, it should be better. But the underground stations are sort of underproportioned at the moment in Munich.
yeah.
So um, when they're yeah, well, even one filled train will actually kind of clock all the escalators at the Hauptbahnhof, the central station.
They never
Um,
plan ahead cities, do they?
no, they
Melbourne's the
don't.
same. Melbourne's
Yeah,
building underground, trying to build it flat out at the moment because Melbourne was never thought would be a city of 5.5 million people. Like it wasn't designed to
no,
to accommodate well that many people who wanted to use public transport. So I think we'll be building. I seen somewhere the other day they'll be building underground train lines. I think they've got a plan for the next 60 years non-stop just to be
yeah,
able to accommodate it. And the problem with Melbourne is they have a rail system, but the rail system goes out like legs of a spider, but nothing goes around. There's no loop in the
yeah,
middle of it,
no,
so you can't cross lines unless you go back to the city and then
yeah,
go to a different
yeah,
line. So they really need to build. They're starting to build what's called the suburban rail loop, which is going to link up, around. They're going to have a loop
yeah,
around it at some stage, but they've only built one section that's been going for the last 8 or 9 years. So by the time they reckon it'll be about 50 or 60 years by the time they can build this whole loop around because a lot of the lines are 20 or 30 kilometers apart, like where so the
yeah.
loop is like 100 kilometers or something like that.
Yeah,
That
well, the
they've got
further
a
out you get, the more distance you will
yeah,
have. Yeah, so
yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
yeah,
So yeah, so they're about to unleash 5 new underground stations, I think, next year in Melbourne, just to start the process and alleviate some of the traffic or some of that, like you said, at the main station in Munich, or to stop so many people going through the two main stations in the city
Yeah.
centre. They've built a couple, like a few suburbs out, that are going to act as main thoroughfares as well, just to alleviate the overcrowdedness of it.
Yeah, it's actually so bad that we, as locals here in Munich, we don't like to go to the city center in the weekend because it's just there are too many people and it takes too much time.
Yeah,
We sort of because we go with public transportation when we go to the city centers. You wouldn't dream of taking your car to the city center. It's
no,
just you're just asking to get stressed if you do that. But yeah, no, it's overcrowded.
because you
The
have the
public.
tram, don't you?
Yeah,
You have
we
the
take
tram
the we
out near
take
your
the
house, isn't
tram.
it? Yeah,
Yeah,
I remember coming to your house that night on the tram.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And well, even that has been renovated, but it's it's working now again. And yeah, it's we take the tram to one of the local metro stations, and then
yep,
from there we go to the city center. And we have a couple of options, so we can. There's usually construction in one of these options, but so we can just sort of navigate. Um, yeah. So it's typical German planning, like you say in Melbourne, it will take like 60 years. In Germany, sort of planning for this scale of construction, it takes years. And I've been
yep,
here for 20 years in Munich, and I can't remember. There's a particular train station called Rosenheimer Platz, and I can't remember this not being a construction site. It has constantly been under construction for the last 20 years.
wow, that's amazing,
No,
isn't
no stop.
it?
So
Not stop.
yeah. So yeah, they are certainly thorough with what they do. It's yeah, the Germans they don't just move overnight. I saw actually a YouTube clip of some place in Germany. I don't know why this should be Germany. I can't relate to it because what they were doing is it was like a time lapse. They were doing an overpass, renovating an overpass, bridge where you had cars coming under and cars coming over, and they would just, I think it was literally within one night, they would tear down the old bridge and have a new module constructed thing driven in, and by morning it would be paved and ready for
Wow.
traffic. It looked amazing, but as I said to my wife, this can't be Germany because that would take like a year or two.
It'll definitely take that long in Australia as well, that's for sure. They just finished just near where we live. They've been duplicating a highway, so they just had one lane up and back, and so now they've tried to put 2 lanes on either side. So, and this stretch of road is maybe maybe 60 kilometers, I would say, at the most. And I've just finished it, and it's taken 10 years to duplicate this section of road. And I often
Wow.
think, what happened when people were building our country? If we were building 60 kilometers of road and it was taking 10 years to do it,
Yeah.
how would countries have ever managed anything back in the day? Because now they're just obviously so bogged down with red tape and policy and procedure that this is just how long it takes. And if it gets over 35 degrees, well, we have to have the day off. And if there's a drop of rain, well, then we have to have the day off as well.
Yeah.
And
And
all
what does
this,
the union say?
yeah, all this garbage like this, and then they wonder why we're in debt, why the country's in debt, and all. Yeah, it's just, yeah.
It's the same
Let's not go
thing.
down that path.
No, no, no. It's the same thing all over the world. We have
Yeah,
political situation in Germany as well at the moment. It's really you can have all your opinions, and we don't need to go into that. But
yeah,
as you quite rightly indicate here, bureaucracy is really
it's run
it's
amok,
it's
hasn't
run
it?
amok, and it's all over the place, all over the world. And yeah, it's not really for the benefit of anyone, but
Mm,
the people working within the bureaucracy,
yeah.
making Excel spreadsheets, I guess.
That's right. And spending money that doesn't exist. It's just on a balance sheet somewhere,
Yeah,
that they'll never see or never touch, and that we'll all be repaying for the foreseeable ever.
yeah, exactly.
But that's life, hey, isn't it? So in
Yeah.
Vienna, did you go to the other palace, the one that's out of a little bit?
Schönbrunn,
Yes, Schönbrunn.
yeah,
Yes.
no, we did not because we kept, and I guess this is another takeaway from a week in a big European city.
Yep.
You get to a point where you sort of you're saturated with impressions. It's just sort of you're filled, and we
Yep.
came to that point on Thursday. We said, should we go to Schönbrunn today, or we could also do it. We had time on Friday before we were
Yeah.
leaving in the evening. But none of us really felt like it because we said, "Oh, we've seen so many churches and so many
Yeah.
palaces. It's just,
Definitely.
it's just too much."
Yeah.
And that wouldn't be fair to the attraction as well. I mean, it wouldn't be fair to Schönbrunn if we went there and we just weren't in it.
Yeah.
We didn't feel like it.
Yeah.
Um, we were thinking about just going because it costs money to get in, of course. But
Yeah.
we were thinking about just going there and walk around the park and just
Yeah.
enjoy the vibe. But we said, we will be back in Vienna anyway at a
Yeah.
later point in time. So we just left it there. But yeah, that's. Have you ever felt that, particularly with kids? I guess. I
Yeah.
mean, the
Definitely.
kids can do one or two attractions a day, and then you just
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah. They've had enough
yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot of the time, haven't they?
And you kind of feel sad, particularly if you come
Yeah,
from
definitely. You with that. It's the same thing over and over again. Definitely gets old. I remember taking when we spent like 3 or 4 months or 5 months in Europe in 2019, like it's like that. The kids were well and truly over going to palaces and churches and
yeah,
castles and things like that by the end of it. And it's the same with Asia with temples. They go to a couple, but after that, you go, okay, it's just another ornate temple with a stupa on top, as they call them, and it's going to be painted yellow and white, and it's going to have gold bits on it that look like every other temple in Asia that you see, and that's
yeah,
fair enough too. So yeah, but I definitely hear you. It's definitely more fascinating for the first few days or the first few weeks if you're
yeah,
traveling long term than it is
yeah,
by the end.
yeah. And then I sort of we spent the last day and a half or so just hanging around, just enjoying the vibe of the city is really good as
Yep.
well. And we had a really good. That was the last thing we did before leaving to the central train station. Um, Accidentally, we went into the Peter's Church,
Yep.
and they were rehearsing for Mozart's Requiem. There was a concert that was to be held in that same evening,
Yep.
but we were allowed to get into rehearsals, and that was really a good experience because there were lots of people there anyway. People can really walk into a church and just sit and reflect. But the orchestra and the choir was rehearsing, and so we got a treat there with Mozart's Requiem. And Alex, my wife, she's not really
Yep.
into classical music, but she said this was a good experience. This was
Yeah.
really, really good. She really enjoyed
Sometimes it's
that.
about where you are,
Yeah.
or yeah, it's always about where you are. Like I often have foods overseas and I go, yeah, they're really good, or something I come back and I try and have it in Australia, and it's just not the same because it's about what you're experiencing in the moment when you have it, and and
Yes.
you wash yourself over with that experience and that taste and that smell and and that sound, and then it's very hard to reproduce that when you're not in that moment.
Exactly. Exactly. And we were just kind of, I wouldn't say exhausted from impressions, but we've had enough. We had enough by that point, so we just wanted to sit down for just 5 minutes or so, and then that church came in, handy, just to have a few minutes rest, and then they were rehearsing, and it was just like, so we actually ended up sitting there for half an hour. It's just like, wow, this is really nice, kind of
That's
moving,
it.
in fact, with the musical vibe, and
Yeah.
yeah,
It's important to rest too. Like it's important to slow down. Like my wife makes me slow down because I'm pretty gung ho because I'm always of the belief I may not come back to this place, so I need to see as much as I can see, and
Yes. And that's
why I'm there, like and so I set out to do this a lot, and and probably a lot of it I'm not taken in as much as I can because I'm just there to go and see it, and I say, hey, okay, might only be here for 3 weeks, 3 days, so I'm going to see this, and this,
yeah.
and I rush around like a chook with its head cut off, as they would say in Australia, and but my wife is always tapping me on the shoulder, saying, hey, we've got to slow down a bit here. We're
Yeah.
going too far. Just
That's
take it
that's
easy.
actually a good rule of thumb. You should really, because I can understand if you've paid a lot of money to come from far away
Yeah,
to a destination, you obviously want to have as much as at all possible for that money. I can
yeah,
understand that, but there's a chance you will not really enjoy it that much
no,
if you don't slow down your pace and
yeah,
so I'd say actually sometimes less is more.
yeah,
When you,
yes, you're right. Less is more sometimes, and
yeah,
that's true. I actually find that I quite enjoy going back to a place the second time when I've
yeah,
actually been and seen a lot the first time. So then I can just go, yeah, okay, this is all good now. I'm not in any great rush to go and see everything or do everything because I've already actually seen it all. So now
yeah,
we can just, take our time and do this and do that. And if we want to go back there and see these places, like some of them again, we can. But if we don't and we miss out, it's no big deal because we've already been there and done that.
exactly. Like you
So
said
yeah,
with the Bavarian church here in Bavaria, you've
yeah,
been there a couple of times, so
yeah,
probably when you go there now, you kind of you know what to expect, and you just
yep,
go in and reflect and sit down and just enjoy the place instead of being focused on all the ornamentations or
yes,
whatever. So it's yeah,
definitely,
I kind of felt the same thing when we were in New Zealand
yep,
for 3 months. The scenery, the nature in New Zealand is breathtaking, really astounding, and just beautiful. But you come to a point after like 2.5 months of just seeing mountains and
yep,
yeah, pastures and
hmm
whatnot. It's just and
yeah,
woods.
yeah,
It's just too much, and it's actually you don't do
justice,
justice. No, yeah,
yeah.
it's just
The shock and awe effect is gone by that
exactly. I
stage, hasn't
remember
it? Yeah.
standing making photographs with my camera, and I'm just taking some photos here now because I can't take it in right now. It's just too much. And then these are my favorite photos now,
Yeah.
like 10 years later, because I
Yeah.
knew that. Yeah, well, even though I couldn't really take it in, I would still remember
Remember it. Yeah.
when once I saw the photos. So that's a good thing. But yeah, in New Zealand, I owe you one. I need to come back. It's just because the last at least the last month was just too much.
Okay, let's go to
Yeah,
New Zealand holiday time.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I could do
Yeah,
it going back to New Zealand at some stage for sure. Like I
yeah,
said, I've only spent about 5 days there in total, even though it's the closest country to where I
yeah,
live. But yeah, I'll head back there at some stage. I've just got to find the time and find the holidays that I need. I'm running out of work holidays,
yeah,
so I've got to keep my head down for a little bit after we go to China in December and for 6 months or so, and hopefully bank up some work holidays so then I
yeah.
can do something
Yeah,
again. So
you're going. Your next destination is China, right? You're going to see
going to
willows. Yeah,
China
yeah.
on December 18th, and we'll be in China until Boxing Day or December 26th, and then we're flying to Thailand for 10 days, I think, and then
Oh,
back
so
to Australia.
you're
So
spending your New Year's in Thailand.
yes, I'll be in Bangkok. So spending about 10 days in Bangkok. I might make a few day trips out of Bangkok though. I might go to Pattaya or Hua Hin or Ayutthaya, which is another place. So or Kanchanaburi.
Yeah,
So yeah, but I really enjoyed Bangkok last time we were there. I found Bangkok was a real melting pot of modern versus old, and I like street food there and things like that. So and like I
yeah,
said, it's been 5 years since I've been to Bangkok, so I thought, we'll just go there for 10 days. It's simpler in the end. 10 days not really enough time to move around to too many places. So I was like, we'll just go and lob there and we book an apartment there for on booking.com like you with two-bedroom
Hmm.
apartment since we've
Hmm.
got Marley will be with us and it's got a pool there and so so it should be quite all right. And if we decide to go out and do a few things, we will. And if not, we might sit around the pool and in the warmth and drink some
Yeah,
beers or eat some
it's
food or
yeah.
all of the above. So we'll really just wing it and see what's going on. I've only booked maybe one thing. I booked a riverboat cruise one night for dinner in Bangkok the other day, but other than that, there's not really too much I've got on my radar. So we'll just
We
see what
enjoyed
happens.
Bangkok too. We Anton was only like 3 years old at the time,
Yep.
but we had a hotel right at the riverfront,
Yep.
and it was just fascinating to just sit there and watch all the traffic on
Yeah.
the main river there going through.
Yep.
It's really lots of boats there, and it was the
Most
easiest.
definitely.
It was the easiest way for us to get from where we were in the hotel to the city center. It was actually
Yeah.
just down the street, around the corner. There was was really like a bus stop, really,
Yeah.
with just a
Hop
boat.
on, hop off boat
Yeah,
stop. Yeah,
yeah,
for
yeah.
sure. Yeah, no, it's good. So yeah, I'm probably actually looking forward to going to Thailand more than I'm looking forward to going to China. Not that for any other reason than the fact that it'll be cold in China. I think it'll be about 2 degrees or something is the
Oh
average.
yeah.
-3 to 2 is the average where my daughter lives. So, obviously there won't be a lot of wanting to go out and do too much. The weather will, could be snowing, could be, not that that's an excuse, but, it doesn't snow where we are. And I don't really like the cold weather all that much, to be honest with you. So, so
Yeah.
yeah, I'd much prefer it to be warmer, than colder. So yeah, so we're just going to, like I said, we're going to China only for a week to see my daughter, but we're also not staying in the city centre this time. We're staying out near where she lives in a small apartment, so I don't really know what's around that area either. So yeah, so it'll be a bit of a surprise, but
It's
China will be
China.
good.
It's
I
China.
like
There will be
China.
something. There will be something
Yeah,
around. Yeah.
most
Yeah.
definitely. And at this
Yeah.
stage, I'm not quite sure. We might even be heading back to China again in after that in possibly April to do something to do with our website. So I'll just wait and see whether that eventuates. But it was quite exciting, the offer we got. So I'll just wait to confirm that before we talk about it
Okay.
next time.
Don't
So
jinx it.
yeah,
Don't jinx it.
no, I don't want to at this stage. So
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, so I've got a few things up our sleeve at this stage, but that's about it that I've got planned. And yeah, I'm not quite sure what's going on next year. We had some friends from the UK who are wanting to come out. They've got a teenage son, and we went to their wedding last year in England, so we might do something in Asia with them. But other than that, just some local trips. I want to go back to Tasmania in Australia as well, and
Oh yeah.
yeah, do a few things. So, but travel's always
Tassie.
there. It's always on the top of my list of things to do. Some people live to work. I work to live. So to travel
Yeah.
as much as we can.
Of course. And that's what I find fascinating about you and your family. You really kind of you live you walk the talk, as you say. I mean, because a lot of people say no, traveling is too expensive, but it really depends on how you prioritize all
Well,
your.
that's it.
Of course, it's. I put it in black and white terms right now, but it's really hard. But of course, I know there are people less fortunate, obviously,
Yeah,
but
definitely.
for most people, like just normal people working and having a family, there is a way to kind of save money every month and just prioritize traveling.
Yeah.
um
Yes, I mean,
and
it's simple, isn't it? Sometimes, I mean, you stop buying coffee, stop buying your lunch, just little things like that all
yeah.
soon add up, so, and yeah, I don't know. It is what it is.
you have
You either
you,
love it or you don't, and you either find that you want to buy a big house and a big car, or you want to travel, or, and if you're lucky enough to be able to afford all them things, well, that's even better. But not a lot of
exactly.
us, not a lot
No,
of us can. So,
neither can we. I mean, do you have that sort of a TV program in Australia where they will they will have they will cast like broke families in financial terms, and
yeah.
they will analyze their whole financial situation and get
Oh,
them back
okay.
on track, and then they will help them getting, their financial situation in
That
order.
sounds good.
Yeah, it does. But sometimes, it's really their own fault. It
Oh,
sounds
for
harsh,
sure. Oh,
because once they
yeah.
start analyzing, well, you go to the like Starbucks every morning,
Yeah.
buy a $5 coffee or
Fee. Yep.
and a pastry. That's $10 a day. And I mean, adding that up, that's $300 a month. Where you
Yep.
could, stuff like that,
There's $3,500 a year. That's enough for a holiday.
it is.
Literally, isn't it? Like,
It is.
so yeah.
Just think about these little things.
Yeah.
Obviously, we enjoy going to our local diner or cafe every once in a while, but we are very aware that we can't do this every day. We can't even do it every week. Because there are things we would much rather like to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about prioritizing, really.
Yeah.
And I think
That's it.
you and your family, Mark, you are doing this really, really you're an example to us all in terms of traveling. I really enjoy
Oh,
uh, following that because yeah,
I'm dreaming of the day where we can travel full time, but we'll see what happens down that
yeah,
line in the next
yeah,
few years. So that might happen. But yeah, hopefully when we go to China, like I said, we can do a podcast from China and we'll
absolutely,
see what
absolutely,
happens. Last time I was
yeah,
there, the internet was a bit dodgy, so I'm not quite sure. We'll have to test it out maybe and see how it goes. But yeah, lots of interesting stuff going on in China, so that will be good to talk about that and some of the
yeah.
prices things are in China and
Yeah, also from a touristic point of view,
yeah,
what can you and what can you not do?
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. One thing I will tell you though is that airfares to China are so cheap. Like I was looking at some today from Australia. Like you can nearly go to China from Australia return for around 600 Australian dollars. So what's that? Maybe 300 euros, like to go
Yeah.
to China. It's a 12-hour
Wow.
flight. So it's a 12-hour flight each way for around 150 euro each way. Like that is, I'd be lucky to be able to fly from Melbourne to Perth and
Yeah.
back for under that price. Like it would. It'd be cheaper to fly to China than it would be to fly to Perth. I think it's
Yeah.
because there's a glut, much like Chinese cars. There's a glut of Chinese airlines that fly into Australia. There's around 11 of them, I think, at the last count that fly into Australia. So the prices are always ultra competitive, which should make it pretty attractive for people to go to China. And I believe even from Europe, prices are pretty cheap because Chinese airlines still have the right to fly over Russia, which makes their flight time a lot quicker than it is for the
Yeah.
European carriers who are not allowed to fly over Russia at the moment. And that's why I read the other day ones like BA and KLM and I think even Air France have cancelled a lot of their China services because
Hmm.
they can't compete with the Chinese airlines who can
Oh,
fly over Russia. So now, but then hence the problem with that is, then I read the other day that these airlines are now going to the European Union and they want a tariff placed on Chinese airlines because it's unfair because they can fly over Russia and make their flights cheaper and faster and we can't.
fine. Let's have more bureaucracy then.
Bureaucracy run mad, isn't it? Can't
Yeah.
let anyone get ahead of the pack, can we? Like that's
No,
that's.
you don't get a
I thought we
chance.
lived in a I thought we lived in a democratic society, not a communist society where everyone was meant to be even.
But what's your experience in general with Chinese airlines? Because I've flown into Hong Kong and Shanghai and out again, and it was really just on European or
Yeah.
think once it was even on Australian airline. I can't remember,
Yeah.
but yeah, I never flown with a strictly Chinese airline. What's your experience there?
So last time when we went in September, we flew with one called Xiamen Air,
Hmm.
and we flew with Air China, who is like the national flag
That's a
carrier.
national, yeah,
And they were both you know, my view is I sit in economy, so the seat's going to be so-so, the
yeah, yeah,
meal's going to be so-so in all airlines, and the Chinese airlines were no different. The seats were okay. The meals they fed you. Actually, they probably fed you more on the Chinese airlines than they do on the Western airlines, to be honest with you. And they were around more often with drinks. So I think the hospitality side of it, the food and beverage side, was better in economy than I'd experienced with a lot of Western airlines. So
yeah,
like all things China, sometimes it's hard to. The language barrier was an issue on Xiamen Air, but not so much on Air China. Everyone on Air China spoke English, but not so much on the other one. There was maybe one stewardess in the economy that
Okay.
spoke English, so she was getting ushered up to our seat all the time every time we wanted something because we were
Yeah.
one of the few English people on the
On the
plane, even
plane.
though it
Okay.
flies
Yeah.
out of Melbourne. Australia's got a really big Chinese population, so that's why there's so many airlines flying in and out. Because it wouldn't be because that many Australians are going to China. It's because there's a lot of Chinese going back and forth between their home country and maybe their adopted country of Australia. But yeah, I would
Okay.
have no
Yeah.
hesitation in flying Chinese airlines. So yes, I'm flying two different Chinese airlines when we go in December. I'm flying with one called Capital Airlines, which is another Chinese airline. It's a subsidiary of Sichuan Airlines, I think. So, and I'm also flying China Southern. So we'll see what they're like, I guess, compared to the other ones. But yeah, there's new airlines. There's another one starting flights into Melbourne in December that I was looking at today. So yeah, lots of Chinese airlines
Yeah.
flying into Australia, maybe 9, 10 of them
Wow.
into Melbourne. Yeah.
Wow. And as you say, it's
So,
not because the Australians are going to China. It's
no.
because there are local Chinese communities
Yep.
there. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Have a big Chinese population. And quite surprisingly, like where Willow lives, my daughter, there's the airline that we're flying with flies direct there, which is they only fly once a week direct to the city. And it happened to be the day we wanted to leave. So that was,
No.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing because it makes the flight, I'm quite happy to get off, a flight after 6 or 7 hours and have a
Yeah.
stretch and a walk around the airport and then get back on and go again. Or I like to fly overnight, possibly if it's long, so that way I can try and sleep for at least half the flight without sitting there. So, but
Yeah.
this flight we're taking to China is like 11 and a half hours during the day, so I'll be just stuck there doing not much. So I've started downloading podcasts and audiobooks and things like
Yeah.
that. I'm like a little kid. I need a lot of different distractions because I'm not a nervous flyer, but I find it really hard to concentrate on anything on a plane.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable enough to sit there for 2 hours staring just at a movie. So I'll often be fidgety and I'll get a book and read that for a little bit and then I'll put a podcast on or something like that. So yeah, so I try and have as many options as I can to get me through the flight. So yeah.
Yeah. In the good old days, I remember I used to have an old iPod
Yep.
with music physically, all the files on my device. But nowadays, everything is in the cloud, and that's an issue when you are on a plane and you're
Plane,
offline.
yeah.
Yeah.
Unless you
Uh,
download it all before you go.
yeah.
Yeah, I hear.
That's good advice, actually, to remember that, because sometimes you'll well, there's no connection here,
No.
and they will charge you for Wi-Fi on board, won't they? So
Oh, definitely.
yeah, so and it'll
Definitely.
be slow.
I must apologize there if when you hear this, if you can hear a clicking sound, because I was clicking my pen there for a few minutes and I
No, no, it
realized
doesn't
to,
matter.
to stop doing it. So yeah, but like in-flight entertainment, I guess is getting better. Wi-Fi should nearly be standard these days for free. Some airlines are doing it. I know Qantas are starting to do it for free
Are
on
they? Okay,
international.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, so like all things, it'll just become part of your experience, I guess, at some stage, and so it should be. Like
I agree.
Wi-Fi makes the world go round, doesn't it? So
Yeah, yeah. Also, I mean, on trains here in Europe, it's usually free. It's
yeah,
it's it's not very stable, particularly here in Germany. It's really bad. They
yeah,
haven't got the infrastructure.
structure. Yep.
The Germans are dragging their feet on technology in general. You wouldn't think that, but they are in terms of internet and electronic payments and all of that. But particularly in terms of fiber net and internet connection,
And
uh,
5G and stuff like that. Yeah.
exactly, and particularly along the train lines, which often goes across like not very
Yep.
densely populated
Mhm.
areas. There's just no connection.
I don't think
Even
Australia has Wi-Fi on the train from
no,
last time I traveled from memory. But yeah, so that would be nice to get it on the train, I guess. But if you're Australian, I guess, or maybe even if you're German traveling on the train, well, you could probably use your data. But for foreigners, it would be
yeah,
certainly nice if there was Wi-Fi everywhere. I think that when I go to a foreign country, I'm hunting Wi-Fi down everywhere when you're in a
yeah.
when
But
you're
on a
in a foreign country.
but on a train, the even the Wi-Fi service on a train is dependent on the 5G or 4G network. I
Yeah,
mean, because Yeah, maybe they have a better a bigger antenna on top of the train. I don't know, but still, I find that once I don't have any data on my phone, I usually also don't have any data on the train Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's sort of the same.
Same thing in that. Yeah.
I guess the broadcasting antennas somewhere, we're all using the same, and
Yeah.
they are not really
That's,
modernized.
I've stayed
Let's
at
put
many hotels that are like that. The earlier you get up in the morning, the better the Wi-Fi is. Once everyone wakes up
yeah.
and starts logging onto the Wi-Fi is terrible. But if you get up at 6 a.m. in the morning or something using the Wi-Fi, it's fast as. But yeah,
You can actually
by
upload a YouTube
lunchtime,
video by then.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
by lunchtime when there's a hundred different rooms with four people in each room trying to log on to a single Wi-Fi connection,
We
yeah,
had that
becomes
experience during COVID. We actually had it was an issue because in the house where we live, we are getting fiber net now,
yeah,
finally, but we're still using like copper wired
yeah,
telephone lines, and
yep,
so but during COVID, where everybody was staying at home, it was really it was hard to get anything done during the day because everybody was working from home, and at night, particularly around 9 o'clock, when usually kids are going to bed, people would start streaming their Netflix and their so
oh no.
the connection, the speed of your data was dropping, like, oh, it was terrible. But yeah, and since co
That sounds rather
so
rather
that's
crazy,
Germany,
doesn't
modern
it?
day Germany. Yeah. Anyways, it's been a real pleasure, as always, talking to you, Mark. I think the episode, I think we've covered what we wanted to do in today's episode.
Yep.
I hope people enjoy um, these talks between Mark and I. Go find us everywhere because, Mark, you've been doing a really good job on getting us to be present on various platforms. We have
Yeah,
an
so
Instagram
we're
account.
definitely on Instagram, we're definitely on Facebook, so maybe Anders will put a link to them in the show notes
Yes, I
so that
will. Yeah.
everyone can find them. So trying to publish a couple of days a week in both of them, just to try and get some more viewers. But if you're already listening, we appreciate the time you spend listening to us two blokes have a chat, basically.
Yes. We enjoy it. We enjoy it. So at
We
least
do.
that's a thing.
Yeah, that's it. If nothing else, we're
Yeah,
we're talking about something we're passionate about, and
yeah, exactly.
that's all that counts. But for everyone that's listening, we really appreciate it.
Yes. So thank you very much. We will be back soon. We
We will.
yeah, within a week or so. So thank you
Yes.
very much for listening, and until next time.
Yes.
Bye.
Look forward to tuning in again. Bye.
Yeah, bye.